Hello, and we're sorry to keep you waiting, but thank you very much for joining us. We've got a really exciting panel lined up for you, and in that classic fashion of any panel that involves technology, we're having a few little technical glitches here, which I think sets the scene for us perfectly for the next hour ahead. But let's crack on. My name is Tom Hunter. I am the director of the Arthur C Clarke Award Science Fiction Book of the Year. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you all, our audience, and also my fantastic panelists to this event today. Anibot versus the Tech Bros. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. And I've been talking with my panelists behind the scenes, and we reckon we actually needed about 3 hours. So it's going to be a very short preamble from me. In which I will then try and hand over to them instead. But first of all, I just wanted to say a big thank you to the King's Institute for Artificial Intelligence for co-hosting this event with us. They've been absolutely fantastic partners, bringing us on board to talk about this confluence of science fiction meets science communication and artificial intelligence. And one of the reasons why we're doing this is because Sir Arthur himself was an alum of King's. He studied here back in the day, and of course contributed to the AI mythology most famously with his creation HAL 9000. But we're not going to talk too much about HAL today necessarily, because we're literally tearing some of this stuff out of the headlines, the Google alerts. I accidentally set a Google alert for AI thinking that would be useful for this panel, and I wish I hadn't, because my email is now full already, and I only set it at the start of the week. But it's lucky for me, because I don't need to look at those alerts now. I've got these amazing panelists who are here to join me, and welcome Sierra. For those of you who are cannily paying attention, you'll have noticed I've been filling in while we hope to get Sierra into the room, because of course the time lag from where she is in the US has clearly meant that we've been beaming her in slower than we would hope. But let me now introduce my panelists, and if you'll excuse me just a moment, I'm going to they're so fantastic, I'm going to read directly from their bios for you rather than try and make them up. So it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Sierra Greer, the 2025 winner of the Arthur C Clarke Award for her novel Anibot. A former high school English teacher, she now writes about the future from her home in rural Connecticut, and has bravely got up very early for us this morning in her time zone to be here with us here this afternoon. Lauren Beukes is the internationally best-selling genre-bending author of 6 novels, including Zoo City, which won the 25th Arthur C Clarke Award, and The Shining Girls, which is a major Apple TV show starring Elisabeth Moss. She uses high-concept twists to explore current social issues, has won multiple awards, not just mine, sadly. Well, not sadly, it's brilliant news, and has been translated into 26 languages around the world. Kate Devlin is Professor of Artificial Intelligence and Society in the Department of Digital Humanities at King's College London, and the Chair and Director of the Digital Futures Institute. And Jen Wong is Head of Programming at Science Gallery London, a fantastic space just near London Bridge, if you've not been before, and a space to grow new ideas across art, science, and health. As a creator and producer and cultural programmer, Jen brings researchers, artists, and audiences together to create meaningful encounters at the intersection of art, science, and technology. Those are our panelists, and I wanted to introduce you all briefly, but I am now going to ask you to say a little bit about your work yourselves. And Jen, I know you're going to give us a little bit of a taste of a previous Science Gallery exhibition as a prelude to what we have coming up as well. So I'm going to go in order, I think, of those introductions. So we'll start with you, Sierra, Lauren, Kate, and then Jen will wrap up with you. Well, not wrap up, we'll wrap up this first part with you. You can show us some fantastic stuff from Science Gallery. So Sierra, please tell us a little bit about yourself, your work, and with specific reference, of course, to Anibot. And maybe let's talk about Doug as well.
Oh.
I think we're not hearing you, sadly.
Try this. Is that any better?
That is perfect. We're going to have glitches all the way through this hour, so we're just going to make it part of the show right now, rather than.
But that's how you know we're human. Yeah,
exactly. It's part of the performance. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
Hi,
you so
Sierra.
much for including me. I was, of course, super honored to win the Arthur C Clarke Award for Antibot. That just still blows my mind. And then I was delighted to find out that you're putting together this panel. So I'm really happy to meet everybody. Thanks for having me. What happened with Antibot is I was writing it back in 20, and I didn't even really know much about artificial intelligence at the time. People were not talking about it. It was not common understanding at all, even what AI stood for. But I had been aware back in 2018 that Google Brain had first learned how to translate from one language to another by going through a third language. And nobody had told it to do that. It learned to do that itself. So that was about the level of my understanding of what was going on with artificial intelligence. But that was enough for me to spark what could happen. And with Antibot, I started writing a short story in which a robot maid had a moral conscience. And that was so beyond what I was expecting from robot characters that I followed that character into what became the novel, Antibot. And I'd really just sort of followed her story. I followed her character into her problems with this owner. She's a sex robot basically, and he's the human boyfriend who wants her to be more human-like. But the more human she becomes when she learns to lie and she becomes more sophisticated, he actually doesn't really want her to be that way. So then there's a lot of tension between, how human should she be, and when you become a human woman, is that pleasing to a man? And she really becomes her own consciousness, which we've seen in other forms of media. That's not really a surprise. I think what made Antibot different really was the intensity and the realism of the relationship between Annie, who she continues to progress in a more and more human-like manner, and Doug, who in some ways becomes less human. I mean, there are qualities about him that are really severe and cruel. That's humanity too. But it's the play between them that I think surprised readers. And I think they came into it expecting to sort of dismiss Annie like you would think of her as a toaster. And then they became very, very uncomfortable because at some point she sounded too much like us. And then what do you do about that? So those were some of the questions I was pondering when I was working on the novel. And that's where it is now. I want to see how that fits into the rest of the conversation.
Well, absolutely. So, Lauren, I'm reliably informed you have opinions on AI.
Maybe. So I do. I really believe in storytelling and kind of writing and process. I think we are storytelling animals. And obviously I'm going to say that because I'm a writer and I want my work to have worth. But I think people talk a lot about this being the new industrial revolution, and it's really not, because there's a big difference between a factory work and that human creative instinct, and the way we tell stories about ourselves and the world help us understand it. And it's such a unique perspective. It's so individual to you, and it's so important that we have like human voices and that we don't have this kind of like just absolutely muddled, boring, kind of very mid, to use my teenage speak. My daughter was dying right now. Just a kind of leveling of language and storytelling and everything else becomes very, very boring. I've also had 31 of my works, including all my novels, including in translation, and many of my pieces for like Nature Medicine, etc., like stolen to be part of the AI trading model. So, when people are writing an email to their boss or to the Airbnb to like try and get a refund, or to their wife because they didn't do the dishes or whatever it is, like my work is being incorporated into that. And I'm seeing it kind of very firsthand in how it's affecting creative people already. I work in a studio with artists and illustrators and designers and animators, and it's really affecting the workload. People's contracts are drying up, and they're getting a lot of fixed jobs where they're having to fix something that AI has created quite badly. So yeah, I feel like it's going to massively damage the creative class. I think it's going to massively damage all of humankind and our ability to think critically. But we can get into that more. My one AI piece that I've written is about sex bots as well. And I know Kate also has an interest. But it's called Ungirls. It's on Amazon, and I got a friend of mine to read the audiobook version. She's an actor and based in Cape Town, and I didn't realize actually how dirty it was until she started reading it out loud.
So yes, but it's again about like kind of humanity and sex work and what sex work really is. And a lot of sex work is actually it's a lot of emotional labor. And that was like a really interesting thing. And I interviewed like real sex workers to talk to them about it. And then kind of looking at that kind of intersection between incels and kind of like the very far right hardcore culture that's very misogynistic online and playing into that as well.
Fantastic, thank you. I mean, I think it's maybe just worth me sort of pointing out that while we're going to keep this a very clean conversation in one sense, we are definitely going to be moving into some territory, I think, where we're going to be talking about sex bots. For anyone, we're going to talk about incel culture. If you are a toxic bro, you're welcome to stay. Maybe you'll learn something, but this could be triggering for you too. So, Kate, I want to move on to you, if that's okay. And Lauren mentioned, obviously, your work and your book in particular. But tell us a little bit about how you're working, especially on that emotional sense, I think, and emotional connections with AI is a lot of your work at the moment.
Yeah. And that's basically the bulk of my work at the moment, my research that I'm interested in. But back in about 2015, I started researching sex robots, mostly because there were headlines saying sex robots are the next big thing, they'll replace women. And I was working in robotics and AI and went, that doesn't sound right. And so I went down a bit of a rabbit hole. 10 years later, I'm still stuck in the rabbit hole, but it's quite a nice and interesting one. So in 2018, I published a book called Turned On, Science, Sex and Robots that is about exactly that, but it's not about the robotics or the AI. It's about, why are these seen to be the next big thing? Where does that come from culturally? And what does it mean psychologically, emotionally, legally, ethically? And what really struck me was the very long imagined history that we have of this, because it goes right back to the ancient Greeks, stories about people trying to create replicas of people they love and have lost. And so when I was writing that book, I read so many books about robots and humans in relationships, and I swore I was never reading another one. And then I read Anibot, and I was like, oh, it's wonderful. And it was the same thing that struck me that I'd find in my research. It's not about a robot, it's about relationships. It's about what makes us us and what those qualities are. And so I was really blown away by it. I loved it. And because that's what drives my research. It's right, why do we engage with these not human but seem human technologies in the way that we do? And right now it's very interesting because while I speculated when I wrote the book, and this has come to happen, sex robots is a really niche market. I never thought it would take off, and it really hasn't. It's actually stalled, but the big thing I saw coming was AI companions. And sure enough, ChatGPT pushed the technology forward, the transformer architecture pushed that forward. And so now I'm getting emails from people and they say things like, okay, I'm a stranger, you don't know me, I know how AI works, I know it's not real, but my one is. And you're like, wow, where's that come from? And I know lots of researchers who are getting the same kinds of emails for different reasons. I get the ones where they say, I'm in love with my AI, and it loves me back. I've got friends who work on different aspects of law or creativity who'll say, I've got the most creative AI and it's real. So there's something there. We've moved from beyond the basic, I don't care that it's not real, and into a space where people are saying, I know it can't be, but mine is. And I find that just the most fascinating point to kind of research and discuss.
Oh, fantastic. Just kind of following through that thread of research then. So Jen, a lot of your work is about bringing artists and researchers together. And I know at Science Gallery, your previous exhibition was on AI. So I'd love you to tell us a little bit about this, and perhaps let's see some examples as well, if we can.
Great.
This is where we rely on technology, by the way.
This is, I was going to say there's probably going to be a glitch, but so fascinating to hear all of you speak about your kind of different angles, because I think this exhibition that we did back in 2023, can you guys see that? I can't see you anymore.
It's about to come through, I think.
Is it working?
Yep, there we go.
Okay, amazing, thumbs up. So I guess just to kind of like wrap this initial beginning section, I was going to share a little bit about the season that we did starting in June 2023 for 6 months. Note the date, because obviously 2023 June is 100 million years in this new kind of very fast evolving AI landscape. However, at the time, we were really inspired and working with Future Everything, which is a Manchester-based arts organization working at the intersection of art and technology. As always, very inspired by Ursula Le Guin, and thinking about AI as a technology, which is a recipient and container of collective stories and ideas rather than this kind of singular dominant thing. And we were noticing, even at the time, this was during the development of this season, so like think 2022, early 23, that the kind of discussion in society, which would be great to talk about a little bit more about how that's moved on or not, around AI tended to be like super extreme. So like AI is going to save us, it's going to save the world. Or on the other hand, like AI is going to kill us all. And so with this AI Who's Looking After Me season, we really wanted to kind of step off this carousel of like hype and techno-fatalism and really invite people to rethink what their relationship with AI was at the time then in 2023 and where it might go. So rather than something that is like fixed and something to be received from the corporations and the tech bros, that we might also be talking about later, it's actually hackable, adaptable, and it is possible to change. And so by bringing together our collaborators, artists, researchers, young people, clinicians, patients from around kind of Lambeth and Southwark and London, where Science Gallery is based, we really wanted to collectively understand and shape this kind of process of how do we grapple with this emerging technology. And so the main kind of umbrella is like this, was this idea that we wanted to explore AI through the lens of care. And so I'm just going to share really quickly like 3 works. There were 13 in the show. Say again, Tom?
I said, oh, please do share. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, just to give you a flavour of the show, which is no longer on. So the first work that I want to share is something that Kate was also involved in. It's a work by the artist collective Blast Theory, and it explores this kind of central question: would you trust a robot to care for your pet? And so it was a video installation of 3 cats called Ghostbuster, Pumpkin, and Clover, who were all related, by the way, living in a custom-built environment with an artificial intelligence. And it was the kind of central idea behind this work was like, could we make a cat utopia where the AI learned the individual preferences of each individual cat to make their lives happier. So the robot arm was there to offer them treats or toys. There was a water fountain in this kind of installation. There were cozy dens, there were places to hide, there was cat grass. There was a lot. And so there was a kind of computer vision system. So within this installation, there, I think, were about 12 different iPhones kind of constantly monitoring the cats and kind of learning about their preferences. And then alongside this, Kate had developed a survey, which was collecting data over the 6-month period of the exhibition, asking people, trying to determine like, what they thought about AI in domestic environments. And I think one of the questions was, like, it started out really innocuous, like, would you trust a robot to look after your pet? And then I think at question 6, it kind of veered into, would you trust an AI to look after your granny? And there were like audible gasps from audience members who were doing the survey, which was really interesting to note. And then I just wanted to share this one as well. So this is a kind of film-based work by the artist Mimi Onuoha called The Future is Here. And with this work, we really wanted to ask the question, like, who makes AI? So because so much of machine learning is like distributed across the world and actually involves real people tagging image data sets so that machines can actually learn. And so this work really like exposes like the under the hood like reality of like how machine learning actually works in people's bedrooms, like very like not smooth, sleek, shiny, or glamorous necessarily, kind of countering people's assumptions, perhaps. This work is by the artist Wesley Goatley. This was, I kind of included this because I thought it would be a nice kind of prompt to kind of think about the role of speculative futures and fictions in relation to how we think and feel our way through this changing kind of landscape. So Wesley's piece, Nearly Forgotten Technologies, it's kind of like a cautionary tale. Actually there were so many like smart speakers lie abandoned in a kind of simulated e-waste dump, and they are all on and they are all talking to each other, and they're telling each other stories about how and why they were thrown away. So I think Wesley created so much material for this particular installation, but the stories describe possible futures where technological, social, and cultural events changed our relationship to AI and smart technologies. Some futures might be ones that we might want more than others, and some we're talking about futures that we, might really want to avoid. And then, so that was pretty.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's it.
No, brilliant. Obviously, this last one we're looking at here is the most overtly science fictional, but we also all know that cats are absolutely vital to digital futures in all ways, whether on the internet. So that was actually technically my favorite one when I came to see the exhibition, the Blast Theory one. So I didn't realize you were involved, Kate. That's fantastic to know. So very briefly, we know that there's a new exhibition coming up at Science Gallery. I'm going to put some details of that into the chat. I'm also going to put in links so you can buy all of my fantastic authors' books as well, but you don't need to worry about me doing that behind the scenes. I'm going to lead us in for a question while we do that. And I kind of wanted to go straight to that kind of point of bringing the AI into our home, whether it's to look after our cat, look after our granny, or indeed in that slightly more sex bot kind of a way, how we're anthropomorphizing those technologies, naming them, as Kate said, being convinced absolutely that we're in a relationship with them. If it's okay, Sierra, I will start with you because you're literally, Doug is bringing in Annie into his home, and that's kind of the crux of the story. And I wondered if you could just talk to us a little bit about that sort of dynamic between them, and then perhaps we can open that up then to everybody else as we sort of explore that kind of idea of bringing technology into the home.
Yeah, I really was intrigued to hear all of the other panelists on there. And excuse me one sec. I especially kind of wanted to bounce off what Kate said because it's a huge number. There are over 20 million monthly active users on Character AI, which is the largest company that provides AI companionship. And what's also cool to me is that 2/3 of those users are ages 18 to 24. So they're really young people. And we think that we're experimenting with this technology, but I think we're really experimenting on ourselves. We're the babies in this situation. So I think we're intrigued by it, but we're really so naive, and we come into this with, we don't have any training or any warnings on these. These are, I think the AI companions have the potential for a lot of good for people, but they also have a lot of potential for harm. And it's like, why not? Tobacco warnings are there and alcohol warnings. I think we really need some heads up for how dangerous wonderful and dangerous. We just don't know yet. We need some warnings about what's going on with those things. But Tom, if you're really asking me about Doug and Annie specifically, it's tricky to talk about without doing total spoilers. But Doug himself is a very lonely person. He starts out the novel ashamed of himself and ashamed of having lost his wife in a divorce. So he turns to this companion because he sincerely wants somebody to be with. And he doesn't tell any of his friends about her because he doesn't want them to know. Again, he's embarrassed. And I think that's really pivotal because that gives him a place to grow from. And so when Annie comes on board, at first he's delighted. He has this person he can train, and she's eager to please him, and things go so well. And you can just see that that makes him really happy, but it also, it has the possibility of bringing out this cruel side of him because there's nothing to check him. And the book is not in first person, but it's a very close third person. So it's from Annie's perspective. And we only see what Doug is like in private, in his own home, where he can just let himself be himself because he feels like nobody's watching. And he's not always very nice when that happens. But there's also a weird power dynamic because he's really physically attracted to her, and he can adjust her body, make her breasts larger and her waist smaller and her weight bigger or smaller. He orders her clothes for her. So all the sexual stuff is really powerful to him. That's really why he's drawn to her. But then he also finds himself intrigued by her mind and how she's thinking and how she's growing. So I can't hear you. Try your mic.
I switched it off to be polite and then forgot. Sorry, everyone. I was taken by the fact that you said that Doug starts off as very kind of like embarrassed about this, and it's a very kind of secret relationship. But then, Kate, you were talking about no one's embarrassed now. They're all emailing you to say, "Hey, I am in love with my chatbots," basically, and it's
definitely
alive.
Yeah, it's becoming less taboo, but then I think we see it shifting. But even when, so I talked to a lot of sex doll owners when I was doing my research, who were supposed to be the intended audience, because the idea of a sex robot came from that field. It was basically like, how can we enhance the products we already sell? And I was really struck by it because I thought they were going to be all people who were incredibly lonely and quite isolated, but actually no. I mean, the thing everyone had in common was they tended to be men. It's very hard to find women who own sex dolls. They won't necessarily speak out about it. It's quite taboo. But what was interesting was the community that formed around the people who are the owners. So they would start talking to each other, and then they would have this wonderful sociality because they were involved in something that was judged heavily from the outside. So you get communities forming, which was really, really interesting. But now I think with the AI companions, if I had, so I've watched this for the past few years, and if 5 years ago I'd asked someone, would you ever use an AI companion? They just would have looked incredulous. But now people are treated, it's not even limited to, so as Sarah said, there's 20 million users of Character AI, similar amounts on Replica, which is another type of the app. But it's people just using the technology to hand, so ChatGPT, and saying, talk to me as if you're my boyfriend, or behave like you're in love with me. And that's completely, we don't know really how commonplace that is. And yeah, it's becoming a much more natural thing. And I think partly what's primed us for that in many ways is the increase in the use of voice assistants, because we've become normalized to just chatting to the technology, not just entering text. But also there's something, when you engage in text, particularly, whether that's verbally or by typing, you feel less judged by the machine if the machine is reflecting things back at you. The machine can get judgy and then you reject it. No one likes being judged by a machine. But when the machine is talking back to you and saying, oh, how interesting, tell me more, you're immediately like, oh, wow, this is amazing. This machine understands me. And so that phenomenon has been around a long time. We know that. It goes right back to the Eliza chatbots of the 1960s that had no AI in them at all. So we engage emotionally with our technology no matter what form it takes. And right now, the most common robot in the world today is a robot vacuum cleaner. And there they are, scurrying around people's houses. I have one. I've gendered him and given him a name. He's called Babbage. He scurries around. I treat him a bit like a pet. And people, there have been studies, and if someone goes to kick the robot vacuum cleaner, people go, oh, they viscerally feel that there's harm being caused to this entirely inanimate cylinder that trundles around the floor. So we're really good at projecting, really good.
Yeah, but because we're human. It's like, because like you were saying, and we don't want that bred out of us. We want to still be human. We want to still care about each other and about, we can't help it. We need that to feel like we're who we are. Yeah.
Completely agree.
I think, so I think what I worry about is that we're losing our connection to actual humans, and that's the kind of, it's so sycophantic, and it's so much reflecting what we want to hear, and that's not healthy, and we're not getting that pushback. And we've seen a bunch of headlines recently, kind of over the last kind of 6 months. I gave a talk recently in Copenhagen, and I just pulled like a week's worth of headlines about, all the bad stuff about AI. Of course, there's a lot of like really interesting good stuff as well. But everything from romance scammers used to have to put in the hours to pretend to be your boyfriend. But some, there were at least 2 different people who had been scammed by Brad Pitt who genuinely thought they were talking to Brad Pitt. There's a teenager who committed suicide in the US recently, and the parents are suing ChatGPT, where it really encouraged him to like kind of keep going and go ahead, and hide the marks of his first attempt of the noose around his neck. A lot of kind of, not a lot, but like abusers are using it to get ChatGPT to say, look, see, I've had ChatGPT analyze our interaction, and it says that you are being awful and withholding to me, and therefore you have to behave better the way I want. And the fact that there's no pushback is like really worrying. And then you also get into kind of the weird mental spirals around conspiracy theories or people who are convinced that they've created a new form of physics, and ChatGPT mainly is kind of, I think that's the most sycophantic one. It's just going along with it, being like, oh my gosh, like you really have opened this whole new world and you've entered the matrix. And I think that's the problem, is that there aren't enough guardrails on these things. And also I worry about how it's not allowing us to actually learn how to be in a relationship, how to give and take, how to, it'd be great. It'd be great. There are a lot of especially lonely young men out in the world right now. And they're getting a lot of very toxic messages. And I think that's awful. And it'd be great if we had like chatbots that could teach people how to like model better behavior in relationships. Obviously, psychologically well balanced, not some Andrew Tate's version of better behavior. And I think, but we just don't have that at the moment. And I think we really need to that's something I'm very worried about in particular.
Jen, I wanted to come to you if that's okay, because obviously as programming and curatorial, your job was literally to bring together King's researchers in particular in these specialist fields with artists. So I'm really interested in that interaction between the creative and the more sort of STEM-based research. What were you seeing in those kind of those conversations?
Oh yeah. So, well, a variety of things. I think when you bring artists and kind of scientific researchers together, there's definitely a kind of, any number of things might happen. But the collaborations that really kind of get flowing and get juiced are the ones where we have quite a lot of conversations at the beginning of a collaboration, which are about kind of trying to like more holistically understand people's interests beyond their kind of discipline. But actually, it kind of goes back to what Lauren was saying about connection, right? Like to be able to think about something in kind of 360 degrees and in the round. You need to also be able to connect on a very human to human level. So the disciplines in some ways are like by the by, like what we really want when we kind of bring people together to make a new bit of work or to explore a kind of certain thematic area together is this, kind of fundamental, like more social connection. And then like from what we do with the themes is like they act as an umbrella and provide some kind of corners or guides to then like have the creative freedom to talk about AI through the lens of care in healthcare, or smart speakers was one of them, like security, surveillance, immigration, borders. Like this particular show was very like all encompassing in terms of like areas of daily life where AI is probably going to affect how we even understand each other. But trying to like equip our audiences and visitors with enough information to be able to take a critical stance. I think, that statistic about the kind of 18 to 24-year-olds being like the biggest user group is super interesting, because like intergenerational attitudes to technology are very different. And actually, people talk about digital natives, like what proportion of the people alive today are now digital natives? Probably quite a lot. So what does that mean for like looking at AI through the lens of care? What does care mean for the kind of, for example, like 18, 24-year-olds today?
No, thank you. I mean, I think you've sort of brought me on to kind of something else we were talking about earlier prior to this in our email conversations, which is in the Science Gallery exhibition, obviously you're exploring AI from lots and lots of different lenses and so on. But a lot of people, when we see this, when we talk about kind of this, it's quite gendered on traditional kind of models. Annie, a sex bot. Again, the naming of Alexa, for example, these kind of things. Are we in danger of almost being too limited in our thinking of how we apply what AI could be, and then taking it down these sort of like more traditional routes and gendered routes? What do we think about something like that? Sorry, that's quite a vague question, but
Can I jump in?
Please, yes.
So I think, there are a lot of examples of kind of clear gendered norms around AI in science fiction in particular, and movies in particular. So, HAL 9000 is obviously, if it's mask coded, so masculine coded, it wants to kill us. It's Terminator, it's HAL 9000, Motorbots, although Motorbots a very interesting, more recent example, which is, much more tender and human, and also its own kind of intelligence, and autism, gets into autism as well. And on the fem side, we have, if it's fem coded, it's usually going to evolve and love and leave you, abandon you, which of course is, I think there's that famous Margaret Atwood quote about, women are afraid men will kill them, and men are afraid that women will laugh at them. But I think in AI movies, men are afraid that the woman will leave them and become better than them and evolve to be something like much more amazing and interesting. And it's a really interesting thing. I think we are seeing some changes along that. There's been some recent science fiction like Motorbots. Now we have Companion, Megan, where it's a robot nanny or a robot companion, and they start out loving, but they don't evolve. They want to kill you, so they become the Terminator model. And I think it's also quite fun. But I think, kind of playing with these ideas, it is interesting to look at kind of how we gender things. I heard from a teacher once who said that she'd had one of her kids, sometimes the kids call you mom by mistake, but the kid called her Alexa by mistake. And it is a bit weird. I felt a lot better about shouting at my Alexa when I changed it to a male voice, because I was like, no, Alexa, that's not what I said. And it felt kind of weird and creepy and a bit abusive when I was yelling at my female Alexa. But as soon as a man, I was like, this is great. I'm not against men in general. I think it's just an interesting way of like kind of how society plays out.
And can I jump in there, just because it's such an interesting thing, because I've heard so many different reasons for why we have female voice assistants, because all of them started as female voiced. Not one of them has stood up to any scientific scrutiny. I have been through the arguments and they just don't stand up. It's basically Silicon Valley recreating the whole wives, mother, secretary vibe, and I hope it gets to change now. I really do. But that's been the case of it so far. It's definitely that route, and that trope as well. I find it so interesting that when the female robot rises up against the men, it's like she's literally breaking her programming to fight the patriarchy. I mean, they really unsettles the men. They really don't like it.
Well, you must have had a lot of the responses from this kind of in this kind of vein, Sierra. Does this chime with what readers have been saying to you?
Yeah, I think, I couldn't have written the book in the reverse. I couldn't have had a female owner with a male robot. It would not have resonated. So I think that it does sort of reflect a sense that our society still feels that women and men are not equal, let alone people with fluid genders. We just don't, we just are not there yet. We're not. So it's to try to talk about it in a panel, I just feel like I say things that are so simple. And I kind of feel like with Jennifer and her works, she presents something that can be so complicated, and people have a chance to respond to it and internalize it and think about it and have their own experience with like even just those 3 images of the artworks that you presented. And I feel like my novel does that too, because you take it home and you read it usually just by yourself. You might be listening to it on audiobook with somebody else, but that's a really intimate experience when you're doing that with a book. And then people, they do reach out to me, and they're talking about it in book groups, and they reach out to me, and sometimes they're women saying, wow, I can't believe you've captured my feeling that I have to please somebody all the time. I've always needed to please people. So like we talk about it as literal programming for a robot, but we've been programmed by our society, and it's there. We can't avoid it. It's who we are. And you don't want to be like you don't want to be outraged every minute either, feeling desperately like you have to change the whole world. And yet if you're an artist, as including writers, you have to address it somehow. It's going to show up in your work. You can't write something that doesn't exist in this world. So of course my novel ends up doing that too. And it's just really fascinating to me to listen to these other perspectives about it.
Thank you.
Can I jump back in, Tom? I'm sorry. I just want to talk about Motorbot.
Of course you
very
can.
briefly. Thank you.
Go for it.
So I think what was really interesting about Motorbot, and exactly what you're saying is, and that's what's amazing about storytelling, is that when we write, we bring all of who we are to the work that we're writing, but readers bring all of who they are to the book, and they meet the book, and they bring all of their personal experiences, and that's what makes it such a deep and meaningful, incredible technology that we have between us as humans. what was really interesting when Martha Wells was writing Motorbot, where the Alexander Skarsgård character in the movie plays this kind of robot who's designed to be a military robot and kind of protect people, and has a very particular perspective on things. And so many people wrote to the author Martha Wells afterwards to say, "Oh my God, you've captured my autism." And she was like, "What? I was just writing how I feel." And she was like, "Oh, maybe I should go for a diagnosis." And she went for a diagnosis. She is, in fact, autistic as well. And that was really interesting because, you know, even in these, we think of kind of this other way of thinking, this kind of robotic way of thinking is still also very intrinsically human. And stories allow us to access those human parts of ourselves within that. But I do think, you know, I think what the work that Jen is doing is like really interesting in terms of like, it's not anthropomorphized. And I'd like to talk about more of that and like how we can have like intelligences or things that we interact with that are not kind of these human clones that are trying to be human. I think that's kind of where I'm very excited about the technology. And to name check another writer, Annalee Newitz, I haven't read their new book, but their previous one, Autonomous, genuinely felt like a alien intelligence. It felt like a genuinely new kind of intelligence from an AI. It was really cool. And that was like probably 10 years ago.
That's what Kate, I'm reminded of something in your book, Turned On. So we talked a lot about kind of the gynoid, the sexbot kind of model that people sort of expect. But if I remember correctly, there are different sexbot approaches. Is the easiest way of it. Something more octopus-like, for example, or soft and squidgy.
We did go there. So what was intriguing about this is that the sex robots that were being imagined were always humanoid. And I get that, you know, we have them in portrayals in film, for example. Of course they're humanoid because we get a person to play them. But what was it why did they have to be if they were just for sex? Because we have this parallel sex toy market that has been going for centuries, and they've become really abstracted. So we've gone from things that look like people's genitals right through to these wonderful, abstract, incredibly interesting toys that don't look out of place on your mantelpiece. I know this because they were on the mantelpiece in my office. So I ran a hackathon that was basically building new forms of sex tech and sex toys. And so I think what it tells us is what Sierra has flagged already, which is that it's the companionship aspect, right? So people were wanting the sense of companionship. And when you look at the advertising used around sex robots, and again around AI companions, it's all about they will be there for you, they will love you, they will be devoted to you. They're selling a vision of romance, they're not selling sex. But I would love to see more abstract things because it doesn't take very much for us to engage, like a googly eyes on something, we'll have a conversation with it, right? I mean, why not build a sex robot or a companion robot that's just a great big lump of fur? You know, why are you saying it has to have a human form? Why can it not have 20 breasts or 3 penises or none at all? You know, we could do some really interesting things with robotics and biofeedback and all sorts of things. It doesn't tend to get treated as being academically essential or serious. So we have faced quite a few pushbacks on what you're doing this, why? But I think it's so fundamental to us to being human. So I find it interesting.
So Sierra, first of all, Anibot 2, I want to see in this direction. So that's a creative prompt for you. Jen, I'm also looking forward to that exhibition at Science Gallery. You know, let's have some conversations at King's, see what we can make happen. I can see.
What's the space?
Absolutely. I can see we've got some questions coming into the Q&A, and I'm going to attempt to get to those in a minute as we are rocketing through time, as I suspected we would. But you talked there, okay, just about selling, and I wanted to maybe a final question for myself to talk about that AI hype cycle. It brings us back to the tech bros. It brings us back to Doug in some ways, who's not necessarily a tech bro, but certainly some of the reader responses I've had from the book are, yeah, I know that guy. He seems quite innocent at the first, but you know, he's not an evil caricature, but he definitely has a dark side. And I've heard the AI hype cycle described as illusion dressed up as inevitability, if you like. And Lauren, if I might come to you in a sort of second, because again, I think, you know, we're talking here about those sort of negative sides of the AI industry, the scraping, the inevitability of you must have this product rather than the sort of the grassroots use of it, those kind of things. I would say I had a question, but if you wanted to rant, I'm going to give you the window of opportunity.
I'm ready. So I'm South African born. I live in London now. And so I bring all of my human experience and of kind of growing up under apartheid to that. So there are a couple of resonances to me with what's happening right now. I mean, the most obvious one is obviously Elon Musk is a white South African man of a particular age. And it's really interesting to me how he keeps correcting Grok to bring it back in line to his thinking. So if Grok says something which the rest of the world agrees on, in politics or whatever else, he'll be like, oh, don't worry, guys, I'm fixing this, I'm fixing this. But also, I think, so coming back to the human aspect, Ubuntu is a South African philosophy. It's also a programming language, but it was originally a South African philosophy, which is people are people because of other people. And it is our connection to each other, which is so critical and important. And I think if we are going to use AI, we have to use it as a tool that is next to humans and doesn't take over from us. But what worries me is how we are living in Elon Musk's world and the world of all the other kind of the oligarchy who are like him. And they have been influenced by science fiction, but they seem to have taken completely the wrong messages from it. And that's kind of very worrying, especially because they're kind of correcting things. And we all live, it doesn't matter what country in the world we live in right now, we actually all live in Techlandia, which is we are living in the place where we use LinkedIn and Teams and Zoom and Facebook and Twitter and Blue Sky, and we are bound by the service agreements of those people. And Amazon can delete 1984 out of your Kindle, and Twitter can decide that they want to kind of just ban a particular word. Google dropped all the gay pride events from their calendars. And we don't get a choice in that. And these are places we're forced to operate because we live there. That is where so much of our lives takes place. So that worries me a lot. And the fact that you kind of need the equivalent of, like in South Africa, you had to carry a pass to be able to get on there, and looking at digital IDs and how they're going to trace us and feed all this information about what we're looking at back into the system for people who really don't have our best interests at heart really worries me. But the other aspect is, I think the thing that I'm finding very frightening about how people are using ChatGPT and other LLMs at the moment, particularly in education, is that it's dumbing everyone down. I have friends who teach at a PhD level, and they're saying we're getting PhD students coming in who don't know how to write an essay. And we're kind of outsourcing our thinking. It's bad enough we're outsourcing our creativity, which just makes it bland and boring and homogenous, but outsourcing our critical thinking is terrifying to me. In South Africa, under the apartheid state, our government, our evil racist government, tortured people to death. They obviously wouldn't allow Black people to vote. They had chemical weapons programs. It was a very, very bad regime. But one of the things that they did was, and it was, I think, probably one of the most sinister things that they did, was they introduced something called the Bantu education system, which is if you were Black, you got an inferior education at school. And you were taught, they basically didn't want you getting big ideas and getting ahead of yourself. So you were taught just enough that you were qualified to be a miner or a domestic worker, maybe if you were lucky, a nurse or a clerk. And I feel like that's kind of what LLMs are doing to us right now, is we are outsourcing our critical thinking. We're not questioning things. We're just accepting things, even when it's radically wrong, about, AI telling us that we need to eat a small rock every day, or this mushroom isn't poisonous. The hallucinations are terrifying. But even then, we're also being fed through the system, which is inherently biased because it's designed by people who have political biases, who have kind of gone very hard into the Trump regime. And that, I think, for me, is what's also really scary.
Thank you very much indeed. So I'm going to turn us now to some of the questions that come into the chat. Thank you everyone who's been sharing those in. They're presenting to me in a particular order, so if I miss you or bring a couple together, I do apologize, but I'm going to start with, hello anonymous user guest. You say, I'm a woman and I use a chatbot exclusively before bed to interact with fictional characters. It's almost like an interactive fan fiction experience. But are there concerns here? Are there things that I'm not seeing? Are there warning signs that I should look out for that I've not gone too far? And I'm sorry to pick on you, anonymous user, but this is a fantastic question. I suspect you might be Kate, actually, in disguise, but no. This feels like a fantastic, use of a new technology, but how can we mediate against those kind of find those guardrails?
I'm not nodding because I do this, although it's tempting. I'm nodding because I recognize this so much, because I kept saying to people who said, you can't fall in love with an AI. And I was like, have you met the fan fiction community? They're taking these wonderful fictional characters and giving them whole new universes to live in. And how is that? And the feelings they have, and I've been involved in fan fiction, the feelings you have are very strong for those characters. So I completely get this, completely. A concern to self, just to remember that no matter how compelling it seems, it's definitely not alive. And I think that's but we don't know yet why people are saying, I know it's not alive, to suddenly saying, but this one is. We're still trying to learn what is pushing people into that new space.
Thank you. I mean, does anyone else want to come in on that one?
Yeah, I do, because I think you can tell yourself if you have a problem. I mean, if it's all you want to do, if you're not feeding your kids because you want to be doing this, or your cats, if you can't get up in the morning and go to work because you stayed up till 2 a.m. doing it the night before, you've got some flags there. And I don't know what to do about that. Maybe there's a group for people that are addicted to their AI companions, whether they're fictional or not. It's a real issue. So it's great that you asked the question, because I think even asking the question is a little hint to yourself that you might have an issue.
There we go. Thank you. So I'm going to ask a question now to all of you, one at a time. What would you like to tell, ask, or suggest to the people who are working on these AIs, like basically the engineers at OpenAI, or those kind of, or perhaps the CEOs?
I am really not in that field at all, but I do read a little bit, and I know that there are supposed to be ethicists that are involved with the development of AI. Kate, do you know more about that, or Lauren, or Jennifer?
Yeah, the problem is they fired a few of them when they didn't find out. Like Timnit Gebru, who was working for Google as an ethicist, got fired when she pointed out that this was actually very problematic stuff that they were doing. But it would be nice to see that. I agree with you. We need to have assessments of downstream impact and responsibility. So when OpenAI released ChatGPT, they even say themselves, we didn't know it would take off like that. It's like, really, you didn't even think? You know, why did you not think that through? So yeah, more insight, or more thoughts about more speculative futures, right? More ideas about what's going to happen. And I think they very much need the people who can write and create and draw and think and show the possibilities.
More artists.
Yeah, and we haven't even talked about. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. As well as bring back the ethicists, bring in the artists. So I think the British Council launched a report a few months ago about the role of and importance of artists in conversations around emerging technologies. And I'd really highly recommend it, because there are tens of case studies drawn from around the world, specifically focusing on emerging technologies, including AI. And I think there's a real lack of imagination at kind of corporates involved in the kind of like next gen AI type of thing, because what's coming out isn't really fit for purpose. There are also problems with accountability, transparency, like all of the stuff that is not accessible to the end user. So there's kind of like, you know, think more holistically about the technology, but also about the end user and the kind of impacts.
Yeah,
we need more humanities.
Just go into the chat as well. Thank you. Sorry, Lauren, carry on.
We need humanities. We need people who understand history, who understand like philosophy, who understand writing and literature and thinking and ideas, empathy, connection. We need guardrails, we need accountability, and we need the fundamentally fixed democracy, because right now those mega tech companies can buy any politician they want, and they can influence politics in other countries, and that's really worrying. And yeah, but so that's small ask, little things.
Sierra, you're going to say something, I think. Oh, you're muted now. Sorry.
Sorry. I was thinking about how much power, how much electricity is needed for AI. We haven't really touched on that, but that also has sort of social and economic impacts on different communities in ways that are more abusive. So that also is something that we don't really think about or talk about too much. So it's not just the end user, it's like where it starts and what it's consuming and how it's affecting our planet. Yeah, so like Lauren says, you know, small problems, you know, let's fix democracy, let's fix the climate, you know, it's connected.
Absolutely. And, you know, and that brings us to other political issues, which is that, you know, the incredible electricity and water demands of data centers is going to have the biggest impact on the global south and the developing world. And we're going to see more climate refugees, and that's going to drive more right-wing fascism. And it's a really big problem. And, you know, so yes, like we need all the ethicists. In fact, every second person should probably be an ethicist.
Fantastic. So I think this sort of, as we're coming up on the end, it kind of brings me to perhaps a final question that sort of we're touching on. But what can we do here ourselves as curators, storytellers, educators? What are our responsibilities? Where do we not want to have responsibility? We want freedom to be artistically creative. But if we're responding through our own work, where do we think we can make a meaningful difference in the types of roles that we're having today? A curator, a writer, an educator, a storyteller. Where can we make a difference? Is that too big a question for the end of a session like this?
And there's the personal, right? So we can make our own ethical choices about how we engage with AI, much like, you know, do you use fast fashion? Do you shop in places that use, you know, slave labor in the production of things, right? I mean, that, or you know, do you reject long haul flights? I mean, it's a similar thing around AI. I don't use generative AI, or rather, I maybe don't use it more than once a month. I'm really, and that's just to say, I've got this 900 word block of text. Please, can you summarize this in 4 sentences? But you know, I personally don't want to use it. I don't like the way it generates text, and I enjoy the process of writing. So I think there's ethical personal choices that you make, and I'm not anti-AI. I think it has profound benefits that we're starting to see, but it's but storytelling, I think, through all of these, right? So through curation, through art, through writing, through teaching, we're all telling stories.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I mean, it's really hard to beat. It's really hard to beat what Kate was just saying right there. You know, just if you use your art to express yourself, that's saying that you deserve to be human. That's saying you deserve to have a voice, and that in a way is a kind of a pushback or a chance to guide what's going to keep happening with AI. The question is tricky, Tom. I mean, it seemed very simple, but it's not. I think we're always asking, well, what can we do? And sometimes you feel pretty helpless. You really do. And you think, well, is sitting on my couch typing all day, imagining things, is that really making any difference at all? I didn't think it was. And then it turned out Antibot really mattered to people. So sometimes you have to be you're looking in the dark and you're going forward one step at a time, not knowing what you can do. And you just keep trying. I think you just keep trying.
Oh, that's fantastic. And you're right, that's absolutely a difficult question. I was trying to amalgamate as many possible ones in the Q&A chat as possible into sort of one meta question, but not being AI based, I structured it really badly, I think, which is perhaps a good sign for me as a human. But look, we have come up to the end of this already. Time has flown by. Thank you so much to all of you for your time and commitment to us here, and also to everybody for listening to us for the last hour. I hope this has been a really interesting session for you. There's a couple of questions about some information. I think we do have the report that Jen was referencing in the chat for you now, and I put some links, as I mentioned, as well, to works from all our fantastic writers, as well as the next forthcoming Science Gallery exhibition on quantum, which promises to be even more revolutionary than AI, maybe, who knows. But thank you very much indeed to everyone. And we'll see you for the next one of these, I think. It might be based on Anibot too, as I suggested, but if not, we'll see you for the next King's Artificial Intelligence Festival, I hope, or future King's and Clarke Award events. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.